This is Cell Respiration Notes Part 2, where we will talk about the different types of respiration. So cell respiration is our overall process, and there are two things that might happen. We could have aerobic respiration or anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration uses or requires oxygen. Anaerobic respiration does not require oxygen. So, depending on the type of organism, one or both of these processes can occur. So, organisms may live in a low O2 environment, meaning they live in a place where there's not a lot of accessible oxygen, or experience times of low oxygen, which means they have to do anaerobic respiration. And this leads us to fermentation, which occurs after glycolysis, which is our first step in respiration, if there is not enough O2 around. So with aerobic respiration, we have glycolysis, Krebs cycle, etc. With anaerobic, we'll have glycolysis followed by one of the types of fermentation, which is what we'll look at next. There are two types of fermentation. The first one is called alcoholic fermentation. And the second one is called lactic acid fermentation. We'll start with alcoholic fermentation. This process is done by yeast and a few other microorganisms. During alcoholic fermentation, the organism produces CO2, or carbon dioxide, and alcohol. So the reaction for that is we have our pyruvate, which is from glycolysis, and we'll use NADH to make alcohol, CO2, and NAD. This frees up NAD to be able to take part in glycolysis again. So these organisms are for sure doing this process. The second type of fermentation is lactic acid fermentation. This process is done by most organisms. even you. This is what will happen if regular aerobic respiration cannot take place. For example, when you are having a super great workout, our body is doing respiration quite a lot to make enough energy so that our muscles can do what they need to do. But as we, stop having enough oxygen around, our bodies will switch to do lactic acid fermentation after glycolysis instead of the Krebs cycle. And that's when we get a lot of lactic acid buildup in our muscles and can feel sore. This process produces lactic acid. So we'll use our pyruvate from glycolysis and NADH, which is also from glycolysis, to make lactic acid, and NAD, which will be sent back to glycolysis so that it can pick up some more electrons. So with anaerobic respiration, we have glycolysis followed by fermentation. Aerobic is what we talked about last time with we have glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and etc. The takeaway is that glycolysis happens first no matter what. And then depending on the oxygen situation, so whether it's an organism that has a mitochondria and can even do those processes, aerobic happens if there's oxygen, or maybe they just do anaerobic all the time. And that is all for our second part of cell respiration.